A collection of poems written by G.K. Chesterton. A Little Litany, poem by G.K. Chesterton. When God turned back eternity and was young, ancient of days, grown little for your mirth, as under the low arch the land is bright, peered through you, gate of heaven, and saw the earth, or shutting out his shining skies awhile, built you about him for a house of gold, to see in pictured walls his storied world return upon him as a tale is told, or found his mirror there, the only glass that would not break with that unbearable light, till in a corner of the high dark house God looked on God, as ghosts meet in the night. Star of his morning, that unfallen star, in that strange starry overturn of space, when earth and sky changed places for an hour, and heaven looked up upwards in a human face. Or young on your strong knees and lifted up, wisdom cried out, whose voice is in the street, and more than twilight of twi-formed cherubim, made of his throne, indeed, a mercy seat. Or risen from play at your pale remnant's hem, God, grown adventurous from all time's repose, or your tall body climbed the ivory tower, and kissed upon your mouth the mystic rose. A Prayer in Darkness, poem by G.K. Chesterton. This much, O heaven, if I should brood or rave, pity me not, but let the world be fed. Yea, in my madness if I strike me dead, heed you the grass that grows upon my grave. If I dare snarl between this sun and sod, whimper and clamor, give me grace to own, in sun and rain and fruit and season shown, the shining silence of the scorn of God. Thank God the stars are set beyond my power. If I must travail in a night of wrath, thank God my tears will never vex a moth, nor any curse of mine cut down a flower. Men say the sun was darkened, yet I had thought it beat brightly, even on Calvary. And he that hung upon the torturing tree heard all the crickets singing, and was glad. A Song of Defeat, poem by G.K. Chesterton. The line breaks and the guns go under. The lords and the lackeys ride the plain. I draw deep breaths of the dawn and thunder, and the whole of my heart grows young again. For our chiefs said, "Done," and I did not deem them. Our seers said, "Peace," and it was not peace. Earth will grow worse till men redeem it, and wars more evil, ere all wars cease. But the old flags reel, and the old drums rattle, as once in my life they throbbed and reeled. I have found my youth in the lost battle. I have found my heart on the battlefield. For we that fight till the world is free, we are not easy in victory. We have known each other too long, my brother, and fought each other, the world and we. And I dream of the days when work was scrappy, and rare in our pockets the mark of the mint, when we were angry and poor and happy, and proud of seeing our names in print. For they conquered and so we scattered, when the devil rode and his dog smelled gold, and the peace of a harmless folk was shattered. When I was 20 and odd years old, when the mongrel men that the market classes had slimy hands upon England's rod, and sword in hand upon Afric's passes, her last republic cried to God. For the men no lords can buy or sell, they sit not easy when all goes well. They have said to each other what naught can smother. They have seen each other, our souls, in hell. It is all as of old, the empty clangor, the nothing scrawled on a 5-foot page, the huckster who, mocking holy anger, painfully paints his face with rage. And the faith of the poor is faint and partial, and the pride of the rich is all for sale, and the chosen heralds of England's marshal are the sandwich men of the Daily Mail. And the niggards that dare not give are glutted, and the feeble that dare not fail are strong. So while the city of toil is gutted, I sit in the saddle and sing my song. For we that fight till the world is free, we have no comfort in victory. We have read each other as Cain his brother. We know each other, these slaves and we. A Word, poem by G.K. Chesterton. A word came forth in Galilee, a word like to a star. It climbed and rang and blessed and burnt wherever brave hearts are. A word of sudden secret hope, of trial and increase, of wrath and pity, fused in fire, and passion, kissing peace. A star that o'er the citied world beckoned, a sword of flame, a star with myriad thunders tongued, a mighty word there came. The wedges dart past into it, the groan of timber wanes, the ringing of the river nails, the shrieking of the plains. The hammering on the roofs at morn, the busy workshop roar, the hiss of shavings drifted deep along the windy floor. The heat-brown toiler's crooning song, the hum of human worth, mingled of all the noise of crafts, the ringing word went forth. The splash of nets passed into it, the grind of sand and shell, the boat hooks clash, the bow's oars jar, the cries to buy and sell, the flapping of the landed shoals, the canvas crackling free, and through all varied notes and cries, the roaring of the sea. The noise of little lives and brave, of needy lives and high, and gathering all the throes of earth, the living word went by. Earth's giants bowed down to it, an empire's huge eclipse, when darkness sat above the thrones, 7 thunders on her lips. The woes of cities entered it, the clang of idols' falls, the scream of filthy Caesars stabbed high in their brazen halls, the dim hoarse floods of naked men, the world realms' snapping girth, the trumpets of apocalypse, the darkness of the earth, the wrath that brake the eternal lamp and hid the eternal hill, a world's destruction loading, the word went onward still. The blaze of creeds passed into it, the hiss of horrid fires, the headlong spear, the scarlet cross, the hair shirt, and the briars, the cloistered brethren's thunderous chaunt, the errant champion song, the shifting of the crowns and thrones, the tangle of the strong, the shattering fall of crest and crown and shield and cross and cope, the tearing of the gods of time, the blight of prince and pope, the reign of ragged millions leagued to wrench a loaded debt, loud with the many-throated roar, the word went forward yet. The song of wheels passed into it, the roaring and the smoke, the riddle of the wanton wage, the fogs that burn and choke, the breaking of the curse of gold, the needs that creep and swell, the strengthening hope, the dazing light, the deafening evangel. Through kingdoms dead and empires damned, through changes without cease, with earthquake chaos born and fed, rose, and the word was peace. Alliteration. Poem by G.K. Chesterton. The latest school. See the flying French depart, like the bees of Bonaparte, swarming up with the most venomous vitality, over Baden and Bavaria and Brighton, Bulgaria, thus violating Belgian neutrality. And the injured Prussian may not unreasonably say, why, it cannot be so small a nationality, since Brixton and Batavia, Bolivia, and Belgravia are bursting with the Belgian neutrality. Baluchistan and Bonn, Braemar and Babylon all feel the French offense against legality, and Boston and Bilbao and Bucks and Bulawayo will perish for their Belgian neutrality. By pure alliteration, you may trace this curious nation and respect this somewhat scattered principality. When you see a B in both, you may take your Bible oath. You are violating Belgian neutrality. Americanisation. Poem by G.K. Chesterton. Britannia needs no boulevards, no spaces wide and gay. Her march was through the crooked streets, along the narrow way. Nor looks she where New York's seduction, the Broadway leadeth to destruction. Britannia needs no cafes, if coffee needs must be, its place should be the coffee house, where Johnson growled for tea. But who can hear that human mountain growl for an ice cream soda fountain? She needs no Russian theatre, mere father strangles mother, in scenes where all the characters and colors kill each other. Her boast is freedom had by halves, and Britons never shall be Slavs. But if not hers the dance of death, great Dostoevsky's dance, and if the things most finely French are better done in France, might not Americanisation be best applied to its own nation? Every shop shall be a store, and every trade a trust. Lo, many men in many lands know when their cause is just. There will be quite a large attendance when we declare our independence. An Answer to Francis Cornford. Poem by G.K. Chesterton. Why do you rush through the fields in trains, guessing so much and so much? Why do you flash through the flowery meads, fathead poet that nobody reads? And why do you know such a frightful lot about people in globes and such? Antichrist, or the Reunion of Christendom, an Ode. Poem by G.K. Chesterton. Are they clinging to their crosses, F.E. Smith, where the Breton boat fleet tosses? Are they, Smith? Do they, fasting, trembling, bleeding, wait the news from this our city? Groaning, that's the second reading. Hissing, there is still committee. If the voice of Cecil falters, if McKenna's point has pith, do they tremble for their altars? Do they, Smith? Russian peasants round their pope, huddled, Smith, hear about it all, I hope. Don't they, Smith? In the mountain hamlet's clothing, peaks beyond Caucasian pales, where establishment means nothing, and they never heard of Wales. Do they read it all in Hansard, with a crib to read it with? Welsh tithes, Dr. Clifford answered. Really, Smith? In the lands where Christians were, F.E. Smith, in the little lands laid bare, Smith, O Smith, where the Turkish bands are busy, and the Tory name is blessed, since they hailed the cross of Dizzy on the banners from the west. Men don't think it half so hard if Islam burns their kin and kith, since a curate lives in Cardiff, saved by Smith. It would greatly, I must own, soothe me, Smith, if you left this theme alone, holy Smith. For your legal cause or civil, you fight well and get your fee. For your god or dream or devil, you will answer, not to me. Talk about the pews and steeples, and the cash that goes therewith, but the souls of Christian peoples, chuck it, Smith. By the Babe Unborn, poem by G.K. Chesterton. If trees were tall and grass short, as in some crazy tale, if here and there a sea were blue, beyond the breaking pale, if a fixed fire hung in the air to warm me one day through, if deep green hair grew on great hills, I know what I should do. In dark I lie, dreaming that there are great eyes cold or kind, and twisted streets and silent doors, and living men behind. Let storm clouds come, better an hour, and leave to weep and fight, than all the ages I have ruled, the empires of the night. I think that if they gave me leave within the world to stand, I would be good through all the day I spent in fairyland. They should not hear a word from me of selfishness or scorn, if only I could find the door, if only I were born. Confessional, poem by G.K. Chesterton. Now that I kneel at the throne, O Queen, pity and pardon me. Much have I striven to sing the name, brother of beast and tree, yet when the stars catch me alone, never a linnet sings, and the blood of a man is a bitter voice, and cries for foolish things. Not for me be the vaunt of woe, was not I from a boy, vowed with the helmet and spear and spur, to the blood-red banner of joy. A man may sing his psalms to a stone, pour his blood for a weed, but the tears of a man are a sudden thing, and come not of his creed. Nay, but the earth is kind to me, though I cry for a star. Leaves and grasses, feather and flower, cover the foolish scar. Prophets and saints and seraphim lighten the load with song, and the heart of a man is a heavy load for a man to bear along. Ecclesiastes, poem by G.K. Chesterton. There is one sin, to call a green leaf grey, whereat the sun in heaven shuddereth. There is one blasphemy, for death to pray, for God alone knoweth the praise of death. There is one creed, neath no world terror's wing, apples forget to grow on apple trees. There is one thing, is needful everything. The rest is vanity of vanities. Eternities, poem by G.K. Chesterton. I cannot count the pebbles in the brook. Well hath he spoken, swear not by thy head. Thou knowest not the hairs, though he, we read, writes that wild number in his own strange book. I cannot count the sands or search the seas. Death cometh, and I leave so much untrod. Grant my immortal aureole, O my God, and I will name the leaves upon the trees. In heaven I shall stand on golden glass, still brooding earth's arithmetic to spell, or see the fading of the fires of hell. I have thanked my God for all the grass. Femina Contra, Mundum, poem by G.K. Chesterton. The sun was black with judgment, and the moon blood, but between I saw a man stand, saying, "To me at least the grass is green." There was no star that I forgot to fear with love and wonder. The birds have loved me, but no answer came, only the thunder. Once more the man stood, saying, "A cottage door, wherethrough I gazed, that instant as I turned. Yea, I am vile, yet my eyes blazed. For I had weighed the mountains in a balance, and the skies in a scale. I come to sell the stars, old lamps for new, old stars for sale." Then a calm voice fell all the thunder through, a tone less rough. "Thou hast begun to love one of my works, almost enough." Gloria in Profundis, poem by G.K. Chesterton. There has fallen on earth for a token a God too great for the sky. He has burst out all things, and broken the bounds of eternity. Into time and the terminal land he has strayed like a thief or a lover, for the wine of the world brims over, its splendor is split on the sand. Who is proud when the heavens are humble, who mounts if the mountains fall, if the fixed stars topple and tumble, and a deluge of love drowns all. Who rears up his head for a crown, who holds up his will for a warrant, who strives with the starry torrent, when all that is good goes down. For in dread of such falling and failing, the fallen angels fell, inverted insolence, scaling the hanging mountain of hell. But unmeasured of plummet and rod, too deep for their sight to scan, outrushing the fall of man, is the height of the fall of God. Glory to God in the lowest, the spout of the stars in spate, where thunderbolt thinks to be slowest, and the lightning fears to be late. As men die for sunken gem, pursuing we hunt and hound it, the fallen star has found it, in the cavern of Bethlehem. Gold Leaves, poem by G.K. Chesterton. Lo, I am come to autumn, when all the leaves are gold. Grey hairs and golden leaves cry out, the year and I are old. In youth I sought the prince of men, captain in cosmic wars. Our Titan even the weeds would show, defiant to the stars. But now a great thing in the street seems any human nod, where shift in strange democracy the million masks of God. In youth I sought the golden flower, hidden in wood or wold, but I am come to autumn, when all the leaves are gold. Here is the little door, poem by G.K. Chesterton. Here is the little door, lift up the latch, O lift, we need not wander more, but enter with our gift of finest gold, gold that was never bought nor sold, myrrh to be strewn about his bed, incense and clouds about his head, all for the child who stirs not in his sleep, but holy slumber holds with his ass and sheep. Bend low about his bed, for each he has a gift, see how his eyes awake, lift up your hands, O lift, for gold he gives a keen-edged sword, defend with it thy little lord, for incense, smoke of battle red, myrrh for the honored happy dead, gifts for his children terrible and sweet, touched by such tiny hands, and oh, such tiny feet. Jealousy, poem by G.K. Chesterton. The Roman Catholic Church has never forgiven us for converting Sir Arthur Conan Doyle from his agnosticism, and when men like Mr. Dennis Bradley can no longer be content with the old faith, a spirit of jealousy is naturally roused. Said by a spiritualist paper. She sat upon her 7 hills, she rent the scarlet robes about her, nor yet in her 2,000 years had ever grieved that men should doubt her. But what new horror shakes the mind, making her moan and mutter madly, Lo, Rome's high heart is broken at last, her foes have borrowed Dennis Bradley. If she must lean on lesser props of earthly fame or ancient art, make shift with Raphael and Racine, put up with Dante and Descartes, not wholly can she mask her grief, but touch the wound and murmur sadly, these lesser things are theirs to love, who lose the love of Mr. Bradley. She saw great Origen depart, and Photius rend the world asunder, her cry to all the east rolled back, in Islam, its ironic thunder. She lost Jerusalem and the north, accepting these arrangements gladly, until it came to be a case of Conan Doyle versus Dennis Bradley. O fond and foolish hopes that still in broken hearts unbroken burn, what if, grown weary of new ways, the precious wanderer should return, the trumpet whose uncertain sound has just been cracking rather badly, may yet within her courts remain, his trumpet blown by Dennis Bradley. His and her trumpet blown before the battle where the good cause wins, louder than all the Irish harps or the Italian violins. When armed and mounted like Saint Joan, she meets the mad world riding madly under the oriflamme of old, crying, Montjoie, Saint Dennis Bradley. But in this hour she sorrows still, though all anew the generations rise up and called her blessed claim, her name upon the newborn nations. But still she mourns the only thing she ever really wanted badly, the sympathy of Conan Doyle, the patronage of Dennis Bradley. On the disastrous spread of all aestheticism in all classes. Poem by G.K. Chesterton. Impetuously I sprang from bed, long before lunch was up, that I might drain the dizzy dew from the day's first golden cup. In swift devouring ecstasy, each toil in turn was done. I had done lying on the lawn 3 minutes after 1. For me, as Mr. Wordsworth says, the duties shine like stars. I formed my uncle's character, decreasing his cigars. But could my kind engross me? No. Stern art, what sons escape her? Soon I was drawing Gladstone's nose on scraps of blotting paper. Then on to play one-fingered tunes upon my aunt's piano. In short, I have a headlong soul. I much resemble Hanno. Forgive the entrance of the knot, too cogent Carthaginian. It may have been to make a rhyme, I lean to that opinion. Then my great work of book research, till dusk I took in hand the forming of a final sound, opinion, on the strand. But when I quenched the midnight oil and closed the referee, whose 30 volumes folio I take to bed with me, I had a rather funny dream, intense that is and mystic. I dreamed that, with one leap and yell, the world became artistic. The shopmen, when their souls were still, declined to open shops, and cooks recorded frames of mind, and sad and subtle chops. The stars were weary of routine, the trees in the plantation were growing every fruit at once, in search of sensation. The moon went for a moonlight stroll, and tried to be a bard, and gazed enraptured at itself. I left it trying hard. The sea had nothing but a mood of vague ironic gloom, with which to explain its presence in my upstairs drawing room. The sun had read a little book that struck him with a notion. He drowned himself in all his fires, deep in a hissing ocean. Then all was dark, lawless, and lost. I heard great devilish wings. I knew that art had won, and snapped the covenant of things. I cried aloud, and I awoke, new labors in my head. I set my teeth, and manfully began to lie in bed. Toiling, rejoicing, sorrowing, so I my life conduct. Each morning see some task begun, each evening see it chucked. But still in sudden moods of dusk I hear those great weird wings, feel vaguely thankful to the vast stupidity of things. Envoy. Clear was the night, the moon was young. The larkspurs in the plots mingled their orange with the gold of the forget-me-nots. The poppies seemed a silver mist, so darkly fell the gloom. You scarce had guessed yon crimson streaks were buttercups in bloom. But one thing moved, a little child crashed through the flower and fern, and all my soul rose up to greet the sage of whom I learn. I looked into his awful eyes, I waited his decree, I made ingenious attempts to sit upon his knee. The babe upraised his wondering eyes, and timidly he said, our trend towards experiment in modern minds is bred. I feel the will to roam, to learn, by test experience noose, that fire is hot and ocean deep, and wolves carnivorous. My brain demands complexity. The lisping cherub cried. I looked at him and only said, go on, the world is wide. A tear rolled down his pinafore, yet from my life must pass the simple love of sun and moon, the old games in the grass. Now that my back is to my home, could these again be found? I looked on him and only said, go on, the world is round. Rotarians. Poem by G.K. Chesterton. The symbol. The speaking at the rotary is praise devoid of proof. The talking at the rotary turns mostly on the oof. But both require an emblem, and a wheel is just the thing, when you argue in a circle and do business in a ring. At a Rotarian lunch, broken on another wheel than rotary, St. Catherine's body set her spirit free. Here rests the body that the soul may squirm, in all joints broken to a jointless worm. A declaration of dependence, the Jeffersonian justice which degenerate hucksters quote, Republicans have had by right Rotarians by rote. Songs of Education. Poem by G.K. Chesterton. Number 1. History. Form 991785, subsection D. The Roman threw us a road, and sighed and strolled away. The Saxon gave us a raid, and raid that came to stay, stay. The Dane went west, but the Dane confessed that he went a bit too far, and we all became, by another name, the imperial race we are. The imperial race, the inscrutable race, the invincible race we are. Though Sussex hills are bare, and Sussex weald is wide, from Chichester to Chester, men saw the Norman ride. He threw his sword in the air and sang, to a sort of a light guitar. It was all the same, for we all became the identical knobs we are. The identical knobs, individual knobs, unmistakable knobs we are. The people lived on the land, they pottered about and prayed, they built a cathedral here and there, or went on a small crusade, till the bones of Becket were bundled out, for the fun of a fat white czar, and we all became in spoil and flame, the intelligent lot we are. The intelligent lot, the intuitive lot, the infallible lot we are. O Warwick woods are green, but Warwick trees can fall, and Birmingham grew so big, and Stratford stayed so small, till the hooter howled to the morning lark that sang to the morning star, and we all became in freedom's name the fortunate chaps we are. The fortunate chaps, felicitous chaps, the fairy-like chaps we are. The people, they left the land, they went on working hard, and the village green that had got mislaid turned up in the squire's backyard. But 20 men of us all got work on a bit of his motor car, and we all became with the world's acclaim the marvelous mugs we are. The marvelous mugs, miraculous mugs, the mystical mugs we are. Number 2. Geography. Form 179-55301, subsection Z. The earth is a place on which England is found, and you find it however you twirl the globe round, for the spots are all red and the rest is all grey, and that is the meaning of Empire Day. Gibraltar is a rock that you see very plain, and attached to its base is a district of Spain, and the island of Malta is marked further on, where some natives were known as the Knights of St. John. Then Cyprus and east of the Suez Canal, that was conquered by Dizzy and Rothschild his pal, with the sword of the Lord in the old English way, and that is the meaning of Empire Day. Our principal imports come far as Cape Horn, for necessities, cocoa, for luxuries, corn. Thus Brahmins are born for the rice field, and thus the gods made the Greeks to grow currants for us. Of earth's other tributes are plenty to choose, tobacco and petrol and jazzing, and Jews. The jazzing will pass, but the Jews they will stay, and that is the meaning of Empire Day. Our principal exports, all labeled and packed, at the ends of the earth, are delivered intact. Our soap or our salmon can travel in tins between the two poles, and as like as two pins, so that Lancashire merchants, whenever they like, can water the beer of a man in Klondike, or poison the meat of a man in Bombay, and that is the meaning of Empire Day. The Day of St. George is a musty affair, which Russians and Greeks are permitted to share. The Day of Trafalgar is Spanish in name, and the Spaniards refuse to pronounce it the same. But the Day of the Empire from Canada came, with Morden and Borden and Beaverbrook's fame, and saintly sephirical souls such as they, and that is the meaning of Empire Day. Section 5. The Higher Mathematics. Form 339125, subsection M. Twice 1 is 2, twice 2 is 4, but twice 2 is 96 if you know the way to score. Half of 2 is 1, half of 4 is 2, but half of 4 is 40% if your name is Montague. For everything else is on the square, if done by the best quadratics, and nothing is low in high finance, or the higher, mathematics. A straight line is straight, and a square mile is flat, but you learn in trigonometrics a trick worth two of that. Two straight lines can't enclose a space, but they can enclose a corner to support the chosen race. For you never know what dynamics do with the lower truths of statics, and half of two is a touring car in the higher, mathematics. There is a place apart beyond the solar ray where parallel straight lines can meet in an unofficial way. There is a room that holds the examiner or his clerks, where you can square the circle or the man that gives the marks, where you hide in the cellar and then look down on the poets that live in the attics, for the whole of the house is upside down in the higher, mathematics. Sonnet with the Compliments of the Season. Poem by G.K. Chesterton. To a popular leader much to be congratulated on the avoidance of a strike at Christmas. I know you. You will hail the huge release, saying the sheathing of 1,000 swords in silence and injustice well accords with Christmas bells, and you will gild with grease the papers, the employers, the police, and vomit up the void your windy words to your new Christ who bears in the whip of cords for them that traffic in the doves of peace. The feast of friends, the candle-fruited tree, I have not failed to honor, and I say it would be better for such men as we, and we be nearer Bethlehem, it we lay, shot dead on scarlet snows for liberty, dead in the daylight upon Christmas Day. St. Francis of Xavier. The Apostle of the Indies. He left his dust by all the myriad tread of yon dense millions trampled to the strand, where neath some cross forgotten lays his head, where dark seas whiten on a lonely land. He left his work, what all his life had planned, a waning flame to flicker and to fall. Mid the huge myths his toil could scarce withstand, and the light died in temple and in hall, and the old twilight sank and settled over all. He left his name, a murmur in the east, that dies to silence amid older creeds, with which he strove in vain, the fiery priest of faiths less fitted to their ruder needs. As some lone pilgrim, with his staff and beads, mid forest brutes whom ignorance makes tame, he dwelt and sowed in Eastern church's seeds. He reigned, a teacher and a priest of fame. He died, and dying left a murmur and a name. He died, and she, the church, that bade him go, you dim enchantress, with her mystic claim, has ringed his forehead with her aureole glow, and monkish myths and all the whispered fame of miracle has clung about his name. So Rome has said, but we, what answer we, who in grim Indian gods and rites of shame o'er all the East the teacher's failure see, his Eastern church a dream, his toil a vanity. This then we say, as time's dark face at last moveth its lips of thunder to decree the doom that grew through all the murmuring past, to be the canon of the times to be. No child of truth or priest of progress he, yet not the less a hero of his wars, striving to quench the light he could not see, and God, who knoweth all that makes and mars, judges his soul unseen, which throbs among the stars. God only knows, man failing in his choice, how far apparent failure may succeed. God only knows what echo of his voice lives in the cant of many a fallen creed. God only gives the laborer his meed, for all the lingering influence widely spread, broad branching into many a word and deed, when dim oblivion veils the fountainhead. So lives and lingers on the spirit of the dead. This then we say, that all things further rest, and this brave life, with many thousands more, be gathered up in the Eternal's breast, and that dim past his love is bending o'er, healing all shattered hopes and failure sore, since he had bravely looked on death and pain, for what we chose to worship and adore, cast boldly down his life for loss or gain, in the eternal lottery, not to be in vain. The Aristocrat. Poem by G.K. Chesterton. The devil is a gentleman, and asks you down to stay at his little place, at what's its name? It isn't far away. They say the sport is splendid, there's always something new, in fairy scenes and fearful feats that none but he can do. He can shoot the feathered cherubs if they fly on the estate, or fish for Father Neptune with the mermaids for bait. He scaled amid the staggering stars, that precipice, the sky. He blew his trumpet above heaven, and got by mastery the starry crown of God himself, and shoved it on the shelf. But the devil is a gentleman, and doesn't brag himself. Oh, blind your eyes and break your heart, and hack your hand away, and lose your love and shave your head, but do not go to stay at the little place in what's its name, where folks are rich and clever, the golden and the goodly house, where things grow worse forever. There are things you need not know of, though you live and die in vain. There are souls more sick of pleasure than you are sick of pain. There is a game of April Fool that's played behind its door, where the fool remains forever, and the April comes no more. Where the splendor of the daylight grows drearier than the dark, and life droops like a vulture that once was such a lark. And that is the blue devil that once was the blue bird, for the devil is a gentleman, and doesn't keep his word. The Ballad of the Anti-Puritan, poem by G.K. Chesterton. They spoke of progress spiring round, of lights in Mrs. Humphrey Ward. It is not true to say I frowned, or ran about the room and roared. I might have simply sat and snored. I rose politely in the club, and said, I feel a little bored. Will someone take me to a pub? The new world's wisest did surround me, and it pains me to record, I did not think their views profound, or their conclusions well assured. The simple life I can't afford. Besides, I do not like the grub. I want to mash and sausage, scored. Will someone take me to a pub? I know where men can still be found, anger and clamorous accord, and virtues growing from the ground, and fellowship of beer and board, and song that is a sturdy chord, and hope that is a hardy shrub, and goodness that is God's last word. Will someone take me to a pub? Envoy. Prince, Bayard would have smashed his sword to see the sort of knights you dub. Is that the last of them, O Lord? Will someone take me to a pub? The Ballad of the White Horse, poem by G.K. Chesterton. Dedication. Of great limbs gone to chaos, a great face turned to night, my bend above a shapeless shroud, seeking in such archaic cloud, sight of strong lords and light. Where 7 sunken Englands lie buried one by one, why should one idle spade, I wonder, shake up the dust of thanes like thunder, to smoke and choke the sun? In cloud of clay so cast to heaven, what shape shall men discern? These lords may light the mystery of mastery or victory, and these ride high in history, but these shall not return. Gored on the Norman Gonfelon, the golden dragon died. We shall not wake with ballad strings the good time of the smaller things. We shall not see the holy kings ride down by Severin's side. Stiff, strange, and quaintly colored as a broidery of Bayeux, the England of that dawn remains, and this of Alfred and the Danes seems like the tales a whole tribe feigns, too English to be true, of a good king on an island that ruled once on a time, and as he walked by an apple tree, there came green devils out of the sea, with sea plants trailing heavily, and tracks of opal slime. Yet Alfred is no fairy tale, his days are as ours days ran. He also looked forth for an hour, on peopled plains and skies that lower, from these few windows in the tower, that is the head of a man. But who shall look from Alfred's hood, or breathe his breath alive? His century like a small dark cloud, drifts far, it is an eyeless crowd, where the tortured trumpets scream aloud, and the dense arrows drive. Lady, by one light only, we look from Alfred's eyes, we know he saw athwart the wreck, the sign that hangs about your neck, where one more than Melchizedek is dead and never dies. Therefore I bring these rhymes to you, who brought the cross to me, since on you flaming without flaw, I saw the sign that Guthrum saw, when he let break his ships of awe, and laid peace on the sea. Do you remember when we went, under a dragon moon, and mid volcanic tints of night, walked where they fought the unknown fight, and saw black trees on the battle height, black thorn on Ethan dune? And I thought, I will go with you, as man with God has gone, and wander with the wandering star, the wandering heart of things that are, the fiery cross of love and war, that like yourself goes on. Oh, go you onward, where you are, shall honor and laughter be, past purpled forest and pearled foam, God's winged pavilion free to roam, your face that is a wandering home, a flying home for me. Ride through the silent earthquake lands, wide as a waste is wide, across these days like deserts when, pride in a little scratching pen, have dried and split the hearts of men, heart of the heroes, ride. Up through an empty house of stars, being what heart you are, up the inhuman steeps of space, as on a staircase going grace, carrying the firelight on your face, beyond the loneliest star. Take these, in memory of the hour, we strayed a space from home, and saw the smoke-hued hamlets quaint, with Westland king and Westland saint, and watched the western glory faint, along the road to Frome. Book 1. The Vision of the King. Before the gods that made the gods had seen their sunrise pass, the white horse of the white horse vale was cut out of the grass. Before the gods that made the gods had drunk at dawn their fill, the white horse of the white horse vale was hoary on the hill. Age beyond age on British land, eons on eons gone, was peace and war in western hills, and the white horse looked on. For the white horse knew England when there was none to know. He saw the first oar break or bend. He saw heaven fall and the world end. O God, how long ago? For the end of the world was long ago, and all we dwell today, as children of some second birth, like a strange people left on earth, after a judgment day. For the end of the world was long ago, when the ends of the world waxed free, when Rome was sunk in a waste of slaves, and the sun drowned in the sea. When Caesar's sun fell out of the sky, and whoso hearkened right could only hear the plunging of the nations in the night. When the ends of the earth came marching in, to torch and crescent gleam, and the roads of the world that lead to Rome were filled with faces that moved like foam, like faces in a dream. And men rode out of the eastern lands, broad river and burning plain, trees that are Titan flowers to see, and tiger skies striped horribly with tints of tropic rain. Where enameled peaks arise around that inmost one, where ancient eagles on its brink, vast as archangels, gather and drink the sacrament of the sun. And men break out of the northern lands, enormous lands alone, where a spell is laid upon life and lust, and the rain is changed to a silver dust, and the sea to a great green stone, and a shape that moveth murkily in mirrors of ice and night, hath blanched with fear of all beasts and birds, as death in a shock of evil words blast a man's hair with white. And the cry of the palms and the purple moons, or the cry of the frost and foam, swept ever around an inmost place, and the din of distant race on race cried and replied round Rome. And there was death on the emperor, and night upon the pope, and Alfred, hiding in deep grass, hardened his heart with hope. A sea folk blinder than the sea broke all about his land, but Alfred up against them bare, and gripped the ground and grasped the air, staggered and strove to stand. He bent them back with spear and spade, with desperate dike and wall, with foemen leaning on his shield, and roaring on him when he reeled, and no help came at all. He broke them with the broken sword a little towards the sea, and for an hour of panting peace, ringed with a roar that would not cease, with golden crown and girded fleece, made laws under a tree. The northwind came about our land, a Christless chivalry, who knew not of the archer pen, great beautiful half-witted men, from the sunrise and the sea. Misshapen ships stood on the deep, full of strange golden fire, and hairy men as huge as sin, with horned heads, came wading in, through the long, low sea mire. Our towns were shaken of all tall kings, with scarlet beards like blood. The world turned empty where they trod. They took the kindly cross of God, and cut it up for wood. Their souls were drifting as the sea, in all good towns and lands. They only saw with heavy eyes, and broke with heavy hands. Their gods were sadder than the sea, gods of a wandering will, who cried for blood like beasts at night, sadly, from hill to hill. They seemed as trees walking the earth, as witless and as tall, yet they took hold upon the heavens, and no help came at all. They bred like birds in English woods, they rooted like the rose, when Alfred came to Athelney to hide him from their bows. There was not English armor left, nor any English thing, when Alfred came to Athelney to be an English king. For earthquake swallowing earthquake, uprent the Wessex tree. The whirlpool of the pagan sway had swirled his sires as sticks away, when a flood smites the sea. And the great kings of Wessex, wearied and sank in gore, and even their ghosts in that great stress, grew grayer and grayer, less and less, with the lords that died in Lyonnesse, and the king that comes no more. And the god of the golden dragon was dumb upon his throne, and the lord of the golden dragon ran in the woods alone. And if ever he climbed the crest of luck, and set the flag before, returning as the wheel returns, came ruin and the rain that burns, and all began once more. And naught was left King Alfred, but shameful tears of rage, in the island in the river, and the end of all his age. In the island in the river he was broken to his knee, and he writ with an iron pen, that God had wearied of Wessex men, and given their country field and fen to the devils of the sea. And he saw in a little picture, tiny and far away, his mother sitting in Egbert's hall, and a book she showed him, very small, where a sapphire Mary sat in stall, with a golden Christ at play. It was wrought in the monk's slow manner, from silver and sanguine shell, where the scenes are little and terrible, keyholes of heaven and hell. In the river island of Athenlee, with the river running past, in colors of such simple creed, all things sprang at him, sun and weed, till the grass grew to be grass indeed, and the tree was a tree at last. Fearfully plain the flowers grew, like the child's book to read, or like a friend's face seen in a glass. He looked, and there our lady was. She stood and stroked the tall live grass, as a man strokes his steed. Her face was like an open word, when brave men speak and choose. The very colors of her coat were better than good news. She spoke not, nor turned not, nor any sign she cast. Only she stood up straight and free, between the flowers in Athenlee, and the river running past. One dim ancestral jewel hung on his ruined armor gray. He rent and cast it at her feet, where after centuries, with slow feet, men came from hall and school and street, and found it where it lay. Mother of God, the wanderer said, I am but a common king, nor will I ask what saints may ask, to see a secret thing. The gates of heaven are fearful gates, worse than the gates of hell. Not I would break the splendors barred, or seek to know the thing they guard, which is too good to tell. But for this earth most pitiful, this little land I know, if that which is forever is, or if our hearts shall break with bliss, seeing the stranger go. When our last bow is broken, queen, and our last javelin cast, under some sad green evening sky, holding a ruined cross on high, under warm westland grass to lie, shall we come home at last. And a voice came, human but high up, like a cottage climbed among the clouds, or a serf of hut and croft, that sits by his hovel fire as oft, but hears on his old bare roof aloft, a belfry burst in song. The gates of heaven are lightly locked, we do not guard our gain. The heaviest hind may easily come silently and suddenly upon me in a lane, and any little maid that walks, in good thoughts apart, may break the guard of the three kings, and see the dear and dreadful things I hid within my heart. The meanest man in grey fields gone, behind the set of sun, heareth between star and other star, through the door of the darkness fallen ajar, the counsel, eldest of things that are, the talk of the three in one. The gates of heaven are lightly locked, we do not guard our gold. Men may uproot where worlds begin, or read the name of the nameless sin, but if he fail or if he win, to no good man is told. The men of the east may spell the stars, and at times in triumphs mark, but the men sign of the cross of Christ go gaily in the dark. The men of the east may search the scrolls for sure fates and fame, but the men that drink the blood of God go singing to their shame. The wise men know what wicked things are written on the sky. They trim sad lamps, they touch sad strings, hearing the heavy purple wings, where the forgotten seraph kings still plot how God shall die. The wise men know all evil things under the twisted trees, where the perverse in pleasure pine, and men are weary of green wine and sick of crimson seas. But you and all the kind of Christ are ignorant and brave, and you have wars you hardly win, and souls you hardly save. I tell you not for your comfort, yea, not for your desire. Say that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher. Night shall be thrice night over you, and heaven an iron cope. Do you have joy without a cause? Yea, faith without a hope? Even as she spoke she was not, nor any word said he. He only heard, still as he stood, under the old night's nodding hood, the sea folk breaking down the wood, like a high tide from sea. He only heard the heathen men, whose eyes are blue and bleak, singing about some cruel thing, done by a great and smiling king, in daylight on a deck. He only heard the heathen men, whose eyes are blue and blind, singing what shameful things are done between the sunlit sea and the sun, when the land is left behind. Book 2. The Gathering of the Chiefs. Up across windy wastes and up, went Alfred over the shaws, shaken of the joy of giants, the joy without a cause. In the slopes away to the western bays, where blows not ever a tree, he washed his soul in the west wind, and his body in the sea. And he set to rhyme his ale measures, and he sang aloud his laws, because of the joy of the giants, the joy without a cause. The king went gathering Wessex men, as grain out of the chaff, the few that were alive to die, laughing, as littered skulls that lie, after lost battles turned to the sky, an everlasting laugh. The king went gathering Christian men, as weed out of the husk, Eldred the franklin by the sea, and Mark, the man from Italy, and Colin of the sacred tree, from the old tribe on Usk. The rook croaked homeward heavily, the west was clear and warm, the smoke of evening food and ease rose like a blue tree in the trees when he came to Eldred's farm. But Eldred's farm was fallen arwy, like an old cripple's bones, and Eldred's tools were red with rust, On his well was a green crust, and purple thistles upward thrust between the kitchen stones. But smoke of some good feasting went upwards evermore, and Eldred's door stood wide apart from loitering foot or labouring cart, and Eldred's great and foolish heart stood open like his door. A mighty man was Eldred, a bulk for casks to fill, his face a dreaming furnace, his body a walking hill. In the old wars of Wessex, his sword had sunken deep, but all his friends he signed and said were broken about Ethelred, and between the deep drink and the dead he had fallen upon sleep. Come not to me, King Alfred, save always for the ale. Why should my harmless hinds be slain, because the chiefs cry once again, as in all fights that we shall gain, and in all fights we fail. Your scouts still thunder in prophecy, that crown that never comes. Friend, I will watch the certain things, swine, and slow moons like silver rings, and the ripening of the plums. And Alfred answered drinking, and gravely without blame, nor bear I boast of scald or king, the thing I bear is a lesser thing, but comes in a better name. Out of the mouth of the mother of God, more than the doors of doom, I call the muster of Wessex men, from grassy hamlet or ditch or den, to break and be broken, God knows when, but I have seen for whom. Out of the mouth of the mother of God, like a little word came I, for I go gathering Christian men, from sunken paving in ford and fen, to die in a battle, God knows when, by God, but I know why. And this is the word of Mary, the word of the world's desire. No more of comfort shall ye get, save that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher. Then silence sank, and slowly arose the sea landlord. Like some vast beast for mystery, he filled the room and porch and sky, and from a cobweb nail on high unhooked his heavy sword. Upon the shrill sea downs and up went Alfred all alone, turning but once ere the door was shut, shouting to Eldred over his butt, that he bring all spears to the woodman's hut, hewn under Egbert's stone. And he turned his back and broke the fern, and fought the moths of the dusk, and went on his way for other friends fallen of all the wide world's ends, from Rome that wrath and pardon sends, and the grey tribes on Usk. He saw gigantic tracks of death, and many a shape of doom, good steedings to grey ashes gone, and a monk's house, white like a skeleton, in the green crypt of the Coombe. And in many a Roman villa, earth and her ivies eat, saw coloured pavements sink and fade, and flowers and the windy colonnade, like the spectre of a street. But the cold stars clustered among the cold pines, ere he was half on his pilgrimage over the western lines, and the white dawn widened ere he came to the last pine, where Mark, the man from Italy, still made the Christian sign. The long farm lay on the large hillside, flat like a painted plan, and by the side of the low white house, where dwelt the Southland man, a bronze man with a bird's bright eye, and a strong bird's beak and brow. His skin was brown like buried gold, and of certain of his sires was told, that they came in the shining ship of old, with Caesar in the prow. His fruit trees stood like soldiers, drilled in a straight line. His strange stiff olives did not fail, and all the kings of the earth drank ale, but he drank wine. Wide over wasted British plains stood never an arch or dome, only the trees to toss and reel, the tribes to bicker, the beasts to squeal. But the eyes in his head were strong like steel, and his soul remembered Rome. Then Alfred of the lonely spear lifted his lion head, and fronted with the Italian's eye, and asking him of his whence and why, King Alfred stood and said, I am that oft-defeated king, whose failure fills the land, who fled before the Danes of old, who chaffered with the Danes with gold, who now upon the Wessex wold hardly has feet to stand. But out of the mouth of the Mother of God I have seen the truth like fire, this, that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher. Long looked the Roman on the land, the trees as golden crowns, blazed, drenched with dawn and dew imperiled, while, faintlier coloured, freshlier curled, the clouds from underneath the world stood up over the downs. These vines be ropes that drag me hard, he said, I go not far. Where would you meet, for you must hold half Wiltshire and the white horse wold, and the Thames bank on Owsen fold, if Wessex goes to war. Guthrum sits strong on either bank, and you must press his lines, inwards and eastward drive him down. I doubt if you shall take the crown, till you have taken London town. For me, I have the vines. If each man on the judgment day meet God on a plain alone, said Alfred, I will speak for you. As for myself, and call it true, that you brought all fighting folk you knew, lined under Egbert's stone. Though I be in the dust ere then, I know where you will be. And shouldering suddenly his spear, he faded like some elfin fear, where the tall pines ran up, tier on tier, tree over toppling tree. He shouldered his spear at morning, and laughed to lay it on, but he leaned on his spear as on a staff, with might and little mood to laugh, or ever he sighted chick or chaff. of Colin, of Saurleon. For the man dwelt in a lost land of boulders and broken men, in a great grey cave far off to the south, where thick green forest stopped the mouth, giving darkness in his den. And the man was come like a shadow from the shadow of druid trees, where Usk with mighty murmurings past Carleton of the fallen kings, goes out to ghostly seas. Last of a race in ruin, he spoke the speech of the Gauls. His kin were in holy Ireland, or up in the crags of Wales. But his soul stood with his mother's folk, that were of the rain-wrapped isle, where Patrick and Brandon Westerly looked out at last on a landless sea, and the sun's last smile. His harp was carved in cunning, as the Celtic craftsman makes, graven all over with twisting shapes, like many heedless snakes. His harp was carved in cunning, his sword prompt and sharp, and he was gay when he held the sword, sad when he held the harp. For the great Gaels of Ireland are the men that met the God made mad, for all their wars are merry, and all their songs are sad. He kept the Roman order, he made the Christian sign, but his eyes grew often blind and bright, and the sea that rose in the rocks at night rose to his head like wine. He made the sign of the cross of God, he knew the Roman prayer, but he had unreason in his heart because of the gods that were. Even they that walked on the high cliffs, high as the clouds were then, gods of unbearable beauty that broke the hearts of men. And whether in seat or in saddle, whether with frown or smile, whether at feast or fight was he heard the noise of a nameless sea on an undiscovered isle. Lifting the great green ivy and the great spear lowering, one said, I am Alfred of Wessex, and I am a conquered king. And the man of the cave made answer, and his eyes were stars of scorn, and better kings were conquered, or ever your sires were born. What goddess was your mother, what fay you begot, that you should not die with Uther and Arthur and Lancelot. But when you win, you brag and blow, and when you lose, you rail, army of Eastland yokels, not strong enough to fail. I bring not boast or railing, spake Alfred not in error. I bring Our Lady a lesson set, this, that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher. Then Colin of the sacred tree tossed his black mane on high, and cried as rigidly he rose, and if the sea and sky be foes, we will tame the sea and sky. Smiled Alfred, seek ye a fable, more dizzy and more dread, than all your mad barbarian tales, where the sky stands on his head. A tale where a man looks down on the sky, that has long looked down on him, a tale where a man can swallow a sea, that might swallow the seraphim. Bring to the hut by Egbert stone all bills and bows ye have, and Alfred strode off rapidly, and Colin of the sacred tree went slowly to his cave. Book 3. The Harp of Alfred. In a tree that yawned and twisted, the king's few goods were flung, a masked book mildewed, line by line, and weapons and a skin of wine, an old harp unstrung. By the yawning tree in the twilight, the king unbound his sword, severed the harp of all his goods, and there in the cool and soundless woods sounded a single chord. They then laughed and watched the finches flash, the sullen flies and swarm, and went unarmed over the hills with the harp upon his arm, until he came to the white horse vale, and saw across the plains, in the twilight high and far and fell, like the fiery terraces of hell, the campfires of the Danes, the fires of the great army that was made of iron men, whose lights of sacrilege and scorn ran around England red as morn, fires over Glastonbury thorn, fires out on Ely fen. And as he went by White Horse Vale, he saw lie wane and wide, the old horse graven, God knows when, by gods or beasts or what things then, walked the new world instead of men, inscrawled on the hillside. And when he came to White Horse Down, the great white horse was grey, for it was ill scored of the weed, and lichen and thorn could crawl and feed, since the foes of settled house and creed had swept old works away. King Alfred gazed all sorrowful at thistle and mosses grey, then laughed and watched the finches flash, till a rally of Danes with shield and bill rolled drunk over the dome of the hill, and, hearing of his harp and skill, they dragged him to their play. And as they went through the high green grass, they roared like the great green sea, but when they came to the red campfire, they were silenced suddenly. And as they went up the wastes away, they went reeling to and fro, but when they came to the red campfire, they stood all in a row. For golden in the firelight, with a smile carved on his lips, and a beard curled right cunningly, was Guthrum of the northern sea, the emperor of the ships. With 3 great earls, King Guthrum went the rounds from fire to fire, with Harold, nephew of the king, and Ogier of the stone and sling, an elf whose gold lute had a string that sighed like all desire. The earls of the great army that no men born could tire, whose flames anear him or aloof took hold of towers or walls of proof, fire over Glastonbury roof, and out on Ely, fire. And Guthrum heard the soldier's tale, and bade the stranger play, not harshly but as one on high, on a marble pillar in the sky, who sees all folk that live and die, pygmy and far away. And Alfred, king of Wessex, looked on his conqueror, and his hands hardened, but he played, and leaving all later hates unsaid, he sang of some old British raid on the wild west march of yore. He sang of war in the warm, wet shires, where rain nor fruitage fails, where England of the motley states deepens like a garden to the gates and the purple walls of Wales. He sang of the seas of savage heads and the seas and seas of spears, boiling all over Offa's dike, what time a Wessex club could strike, the kings of the mountaineers. Till Harold laughed and snatched the harp, the kinsman of the king, a big youth, beardless like a child, whom the new wine of war sent wild, smote and began to sing. And he cried of the ships as eagles, that circle fiercely and fly, and sweep the seas and strike the towns, from Cyprus round to Skye. How swiftly and with peril they gather all good things, the high horns of the forest beasts, or the secret stones of kings. For Rome was given to rule the world, and Gad of it little joy. But we shall enjoy the world, the whole huge world a toy. Great wine like blood from Burgundy, cloaks like the clouds from Tyre, and marble like solid moonlight, and gold like frozen fire. Smells that a man might swill in a cup, stones that a man might eat, and the great smooth women like ivory that the Turks sell in the street. He sang the song of the thief of the world, and the gods that love the thief, and he yelled aloud at the cloister yards, where men go gathering grief. Well, have you sung, O stranger, of death in the dike in Wales? Your chief was a bracelet giver, but the red unbroken river of a race runs not forever, but suddenly it fails. Doubtless your sires were sword swingers when they waded fresh from foam, before they turned to woman by the god of the nails from Rome. But since you bent to the shaven men who neither lust nor smite, thunder of Thor we hunt you, a hare on the mountain height. King Guthrum smiled a little, and said, It is enough, nephew, let elf retune the string. A boy must needs like bellowing, but the old ears of a careful king are glad of songs less rough. Blue-eyed was elf the minstrel, with womanish hair and ring, yet heavy was his hand on sword, though light upon the string. And as he stirred the strings of the harp, to notes but 4 or 5, the heart of each man moved in him, like a babe buried alive. And they felt the land of the folk songs spread southward of the Dane, and they heard the good Rhine flowing in the heart of all Alamein. They felt the land of the folk songs, where the gifts hang on the tree, where the girls give ale at morning, and the tears come easily. The mighty people, woman-like, that have pleasure in their pain, as he sung of Balder Beautiful, whom the heavens loved in vain. As he sang of Balder Beautiful, whom the heavens could not save, till the world was like a sea of tears, and every soul a wave. There is always a thing forgotten when all the world goes well, a thing forgotten as long ago when the gods forgot the mistletoe, and soundless as an arrow of snow, the arrow of anguish fell. The thing on the blind side of the heart, on the wrong side of the door, the green plant groweth, menacing, almighty lovers in the spring, there is always a forgotten thing, and love is not secure. And all that sat by the fire were sad, save Ogier, who was stirred, and his eyes hardened even to stones, as he took the harp in turn. Earl Ogier of the stone and sling was odd to ear and sight. Old he was, but his locks were red, and jests were all the words he said. Yet he was sad at board in bed, and savage in the fight. You sing of the young gods easily, in the days when you are young, but I go smelling ye and soul and sods, and I know there are gods behind the gods, gods that are best unsung. And a man grows ugly for women, and a man grows dull with ale. Well, if he find in his soul at last fury that does not fail, the wrath of the gods behind the gods, who would rend all gods and men, well, if the old man's heart hath still wheels sped of rage and roaring will, like cataracts to break down and kill, well, for the old man then. While there is one tall shrine to shake, or one live man to rend, for the wrath of the gods behind the gods, who are weary to make an end. There lives one moment for a man, when the door at his shoulder shakes, when the taut rope parts under the pull, and the barest branch is beautiful, one moment, while it breaks. So rides my soul upon the sea, that drinks the howling ships, though in black jested bows and nods, under the moons with silver rods, I know it is roaring at the gods, waiting the last eclipse. And in the last eclipse the sea shall stand up like a tower, above all moons made dark and riven, hold up its foaming head in heaven, and laugh, knowing its hour. And the high ones in the happy town, propped up of the planets 7, shall know a new light in the mind, a noise about them and behind, shall hear an awful voice and find foam in the courts of heaven. And you that sit by the fire are young, and true love waits for you, but the king and I grow old, and hate alone is true. And Guthrum shook his head but smiled, for he was a mighty clerk, and he had read lines in the Latin books when all the north was dark. He said, I am older than you, Ogier, not all things would I rend, For whether life be bad or good, it is best to abide the end. He took the great harp warily, and even Guthrum of the Danes, with wide eyes bright as the long day on the long polar plains. For he sang of a wheel returning, and the mire trod back to mire, and how red hells and golden heavens are castles in the fire. It is good to sit where the good tales go, to sit as our fathers sat, but the hour shall come after his youth, when a man shall know not tale but truth, and his heart faileth thereat. When he shall read what is written, so plain in clouds and clods, when he shall hunger without hope, even for evil gods. For this is a heavy matter, and the truth is cold to tell. Do we not know, have we not heard, the soul is like a lost bird, the body a broken shell. And a man hopes, being ignorant, till in white woods apart, he finds at last the lost bird dead, and a man may still lift up his head, but never more his heart. There comes no noise but weeping out of the ancient sky, and a tear is in the tiniest flower, because the gods must die. The little brooks are very sweet, like a girl's ribbons curled, but the great sea is bitter, that washes all the world. Strong are the Roman roses, or the free flowers of the heath, but every flower, like a flower of the sea, smelleth with the salt of death. And the heart of the locked battle is the happiest place for men, when shrieking souls as shafts go by, and many have died, and all may die. Though this word be a mystery, death is most distant then. Death blazes bright above the cup, and clear above the crown, but in that dream of battle we seem to tread it down. Wherefore I am a great king, and waste the world in vain, because man hath not other power, save that in dealing death for dower, he may forget it for an hour, to remember it again. And slowly his hands and thoughtfully fell from the lifted lyre, and the owls moaned from the mighty trees, till Alfred caught it to his knees, and smote it as an ire. He heaved the head of the harp on high, and swept the framework barred, and his stroke had all the rattle and spark of horses flying hard. When God put man in a garden, he girt him with a sword, and sent him forth a free knight that might betray his Lord. He brake him and betrayed him, and fast and far he fell, till you and I may stretch our necks and burn our beards in hell. But though I lie on the floor of the world, with the 7 sins for rods, I would rather fall with Adam than rise with all your gods. What have the strong gods given? Where have the glad gods led? When Guthrum sits on a hero's throne, and asks if he is dead. Sirs, I am but a nameless man, a rhymester without home, yet since I come of the Wessex clay, and carry the cross of Rome, I will even answer the mighty earl, that asked of Wessex men, why they be meek and monkish folk, and bow to the white lord's broken yoke. What sign have we saved blood and smoke? Here is my answer then. That on you is fallen the shadow, and not upon the name, that thou we scattered and though we fly, and you hung over us like the sky, you are more tired of victory than we are tired of shame. That thou you hunt the Christian man like a hare on the hillside, that the hare has still more heart to run than you have heart to ride. That thou all lances split on you, all swords be heaved in vain, we have more lust again to lose than you to win again. Your lord sits high on the saddle, a broken-hearted king, but our King Alfred, lost from fame, fallen among foes or bonds of shame, in I know not what mean trade or name, has still some song to sing. Our monks go robbed in rain and snow, but the heart of flame therein. But you go cloth and feast and flames, when all is ice within. Nor shall all iron dooms make dumb men wondering ceaselessly, if it be not better to fast for joy than feast for misery. Nor monkish order only slides down as field to fen, all things achieved and chosen pass, as the white horse fades in the grass, no work of Christian men. Ere the sad gods that made your gods saw their sad sunrise pass, the white horse of the white horse vale, that you have left to darken and fail, was cut out of the grass. Therefore your end is on you and your kings, not for a fire in Elon fen, not that your gods are 9 or 10, but because it is only Christian men guard even the heathen things. For our God hath blessed creation, calling it good. I know, what spirit with whom you blindly band, hath blessed destruction with his hand, yet by God's death the stars shall stand, and the small apples grow. And the king, with harp on shoulder, stood up and ceased his song, and the owls moaned from the mighty trees, and the Danes laughed loud and long. Book 4. The Woman in the Forest. Thick thunder of the snorting swine, enormous in the gloam, rending among all roots that cling, and the wild horses whining, were the night's noises when the king, shouldering his harp, went home. With eyes of owl and feet of fox, full full of all thoughts he went. He marked the tilt of the pagan camp, the paling of pine, the centuries' tramp, and the one great stolen altar lamp over Guthrum in his tent. By scrub and thorn and ethan dune, the night the foe had lain, whence ran across the heather grey the old stones of a Roman way, and in a wood not far away the pale road split in twain. He marked the wood and the cloven waves with an old captain's eyes, and he thought how many a time had he sought to see doom he could not see, how ruin had come and victory, and both were a surprise. Even so, he had watched and wondered under Ashdown from the plains, with Eldred praying in his tent, till the white hawthorn swung and bent, as Alfred rushed his spears and rent the shield wall of the Danes. Even so he had watched and wondered, knowing neither less nor more, till all his lords lay dying, and axes on axes plying, flung him and drove him flying, like a pirate, to the shore. Wise he had been before defeat, and wise before success, wise in both hours and ignorant, knowing neither more nor less. As he went down to the river hut, he knew a nightshade sent. Owls did as evil cherubs rise, with little wings and lantern eyes, as though he sank through the under skies, but down and down he went. As he went down to the river hut, he went as one that fell, seeing the high forest domes and spars, dim green or thorn with golden scars, as the proud look up at the evil stars in the red heavens of hell. For he must meet by the river hut them he had bidden to arm, Mark from the towers of Italy, and Colin of the sacred tree, and Eldred who beside the sea held heavily his farm. The roof leaned gaping to the grass as a monstrous mushroom lies, echoing and empty seemed the place, but opened in the little space, a great grey woman with scarred face and strong and humbled eyes. King Alfred was but a meagre man, bright-eyed but lean and pale, and swordless with his harp and rags, he seemed a beggar, such as lags, looking for crusts and ale. And the woman, with the woman's eyes of pity at once and said, when that she had glared a span, there is a cake for any man, if you will watch the fire. And Alfred, bowing heavily, set down the fire to stir, and even as the woman pitied him, so did he pity her, saying, O great heart in the night, O best cast forth for worst, twilight shall melt, and morning stir, and no kind thing shall come to her, till God shall turn the world over, and all the last are first. And well may God with the serving folk cast in his dreadful lot, is not he too a servant, and is not he forgot? For was not God my gardener, and silent like a slave, that open oaks on the uplands, or thicket and graveyard gave? And was not God my armourer, all patient and unpaid, that sealed my skull as a helmet, and ribs for hauberk made? Did not a great grace servant of all my sires and me build this pavilion of the pines, and herd the fowls and fill the vines, and labour and pass and leave no signs, save mercy and mystery? For God is a great servant, and rose before the day, from some primordial slumber torn, but all we living later born, sleep on and rise after the morn, and the Lord has gone away. On things half sprung from sleeping, all sleepy suns have shone. They stretch stiff arms the yawning trees, the beasts blink upon hands and knees. Man is awake and does and sees, but heaven has done and gone. For who shall guess the good riddle, or speak of the holiest, save in faint figures and failing words, who loves yet laughs among the swords, labors and is at rest? But some see God like Guthrum, crowned with the great beard curled, but I see God like a good giant, that laboring lifts the world. Wherefore was God in Golgotha, slain as a serf is slain, and hate he had of prince and peer, and love he had and made good cheer of them that, like this woman here, go powerfully in pain. But in this grey morn of man's life cometh sometime to the mind a little light that leaps and flies, like a star blown on the wind, a star of nowhere, a nameless star, a light that spins and swirls, and cries that even in hedge and hill, even on earth it may go ill, at last with the evil earls. A dancing sparkle, a doubtful star, on the waste wind whirled and driven, but it seems to sing of a wilder worth, a time discrowned of doom and birth, and the kingdom of the poor on earth, come as it is in heaven. But even though such days endure, how shall it profit her, who shall go groaning to the grave, with many a meek and mighty slave, field breaker and fisher on their wave, and a woodman and wagoner? Bake ye the big world all again, a cake with kinder leaven, yet these are sorry evermore, unless there be a little door in heaven. And as we wept for the woman, he let her business be, and like his royal oath and rash, the good food fell upon the ash, and blackened instantly. Screaming, the woman caught a cake, yet burning from the bar, and struck him suddenly on the face, leaving a scarlet scar. King Alfred stood up wordless, a man dead with surprise, and torture stood in the evil things that are in the childish hearts of kings, an instant, in his eyes. And even as he stood and stared, drew round him in the dusk, those friends creeping from far-off farms, Marcus with all his slaves in arms, and the strange spears hung with ancient charms of Colin of the Usk. With one whole farm marching afoot, the trampled road resounds, farm hands and farm beasts blundering by, in jars of meat and stores of rye, where Eldred strode above his high and thunder-throated hounds. And grey cattle in silver load against the unlifted morn, and straw clung to their spear shafts tall, and a boy went before them all, blowing a ram's horn. As mocking such rude revelry, the dim clan of the gale came like a bad king's burial end, with dismal robes that drop and rend, and demon pipes that wail. In long outlandish garments, torn though of antique worth, with druid beards and druid spears, as a resurrected race appears out of an elder earth. And though the king had called them forth, and knew them for his own, so still each eye stood like a gem, so spectral hung each broidered hem. Grey carven men he fancied them, hewn in an image of stone. And the two wild peoples of the north stood fronting in the gloam, and heard and knew each in its mind the great thunder of the wind, and leaving walls that hedge mankind, the walking walls of Rome. Marks were the mixed tribes of the west, of many a hue and strain, girth with rank hair like yellow grass, and the Cornish fisher Gorlias, and Hallmark come from his first mass, lately baptized a Dane. But like one man in armor, those hundreds trod the field, from Red Arabia to the Tyne. The earth had heard that marching line, since the cry on the hill of Capitoline, and the fall of the golden shield. And the earth shook, and the king stood still, under the greenwood bow, and the smoking cake lay at his feet, and the blow was on his brow. Then Alfred laughed out suddenly, like thunder in the spring, till shook aloud the lintel beams, and the squirrels stirred into dusty beams, and the startled birds went up in streams for the laughter of the king. And the beasts of the earth and the birds looked down in a wild solemnity on a stranger sight than a sylph or elf, on one man laughing at himself under the greenwood tree. The giant laughter of Christian men that roars through 1,000 tales, where greed is an ape and pride is an ass, and Jack's away with his master's lass, and the miser's banged with all his brass, the farmer with all his flails. Tales that tumble and tales that trick, yet end not all in scorning of kings and clowns in a merry plight, and the clock gone wrong and the world gone right, that their mummers sing upon Christmas night and the Christmas day in the morning. Now here is a good warrant, cried Alfred, by my sword, for he that is struck for an ill servant should be a kind lord. He that has been a servant knows more than priests and kings, but he that has been an ill servant, he knows all earthly things. Pride flings frail palaces at the sky, as a man flings up sand, but the firm feet of humility take hold of heavy land. Pride juggles with her toppling towers, they strike the sun and seas, but the firm feet of humility, they grip the ground like trees. He that hath failed in a little thing hath a sign upon the brow, and the earls of the great army have no such seal to show. The red print on my forehead, small flame for a red star, in the van of the violent marching then, when the sky is torn of the trumpets 10, and the hands of the happy howling men fling wide the gates of war. This blow that I return not, 10 times will I return, on kings and earls of all degree, and armies wide as empires be, shall slide like landslips to the sea, if the red star burn. One man shall drive 100, as the dead kings drave. Before me rocking hosts be riven, and battering cohorts backwards driven, for I am the first king known of heaven, that has been struck like a slave. Up on the old white road, brothers, up on the Roman walls, for this is the night of the drawing of swords, and the tainted tower of the heathen hordes leans to our hammers, fires and cords, leans a little and falls. Follow the star that lives and leaps, follow the sword that sings, for we go gathering heathen men, a terrible harvest 10 by 10, as the wrath of the last red autumn then, when Christ reaps down the kings. Follow a light that leaps and spins, follow the fire unfurled, for riseth up against Roman rod, a thing forgotten, a thing downtrod, the last lost giant, even God, is risen against the world. Roaring they went over the Roman wall, and roaring up the lane, their torches tossed the ladder of fire, higher their hymn was heard and higher, more sweet for hate and for heart's desire, and up in the northern scrub and briar, they fell upon the Dane. Book 5. Ethandune, the First Stroke. King Guthrum was a dread king, like death out of the north, shrines without name or number, he rent and rolled as lumber, from Chester to the Humber, he drove his foemen forth. The Roman villas heard him, in the valley of the Thames, come over the hills roaring, above their roofs and pouring, on spire and stair and flooring, brimstone and pitch and flames. Sheer o'er the great chalk uplands, and the hill of the horse went he, till high on Hampshire beacons he saw the southern sea. High on the heights of Wessex he saw the southern brine, and turned him to a conquered land, and where the northern thorn would stand, and the road parts on either hand, there came to him a sign. King Guthrum was a war chief, a wise man in the field, and though he prospered well, and knew how Alfred's folk were sad and few, not less with weighty care he drew long lines for pike and shield. King Guthrum lay on the upper land, on a single road at gaze, and his foe must come with lean array up the left arm of the cloven way to the meeting of the ways. And long ere the noise of armor, an hour ere the break of light, the woods awoke with crash and cry, and the birds ran clamoring harsh and high, and the rabbits ran like an elves' army, ere Alfred came in sight. The live wood came at Guthrum, on foot and claw and wing, the nests were noisy overheard, for Alfred and the star of red, all life went forth and the forest fled, before the face of the king. But halted in the woodways, Christ's few were grim and grey, and each with a small far, bird-like sight, saw the high folly of the fight, and though strange joys had grown in the night, despair grew with the day. And when white dawn crawled through the wood, like cold foam of a flood, then weakened every warrior's mood in hope, though not in hardihood, and each man sorrowed as he stood in the fashion of his blood. For the Saxon franklin sorrowed, for the things that had been fair, for the dear dead woman crimson clad, and the great feast and the friends he had, but the Celtic prince's soul was sad, for the things that never were. In the eyes Italian all things, but a black laughter died, and Alfred flung his shield to earth, and smote his breast and cried, I wronged a man to his slaying, and a woman to her shame, and once I looked on a sworn maid that was wed to the holy name, and once I took my neighbor's wife that was bound to an Eastland man, in the starkness of my evil youth, before my griefs began. But people, if you have any prayers, say prayers for me, and lay me under a Christian stone, in that last land I thought my own, to wait till the holy horn is blown, and all poor men are free. Then Eldred of the idle farm leaned on his ancient sword, as fell his heavy words and few, and his eyes were of such alien blue, as gleams where the Northman saileth new into an unknown fjord. I was a fool in wasted ale, my slaves found it sweet. I was a fool in wasted bread, and the birds had bread to eat. The kings go up and the kings go down, and who knows who shall rule. Next night a king may starve or sleep, but men and birds and beasts shall weep at the burial of a fool. O drunkards in my cellar, boys in my apple tree, the world grows stern and strange in you, and wise men shall govern you, and you shall weep for me. But yoke me my own oxen down to my own farm. My own dog will whine for me, my own friends will bend the knee, and the foes I slew openly have never wished me harm. And all were moved a little, but Colin stood apart, having first pity and after hearing, like rat in rafter, that little worm of laughter that eats the Irish heart. And his grey-green eyes were cruel, and the smile of his mouth waxed hard, and he said, and when did Britain become your burying yard? Before the Romans lit the land, when schools and monks were none, we reared such stones to the sun god as might put out the sun. The tall trees of Britain we worshipped and were wise, but you shall raid the whole land through, and never a tree shall talk to you, though every leaf is a tongue taught true, and the forest is full of eyes. On one round hill to the seaward, the trees grow tall and grey, and the trees talk together when all men are away. O'er a few round hills forgotten, the trees grow tall in rings, and the trees talk together of many pagan things. Yet I could lie and listen with the cross upon my clay, and hear unhurt forever what the trees of Britain say. A proud man was the Roman, his speech a single one, but his eyes were like an eagle's eyes that is staring at the sun. Dig for me where I die, he said, if first or last I fall, dead on the fell at the first charge, or dead by the wantage wall. Lift not my head from bloody ground, bear not my body home, for all the earth is Roman earth, and I shall die in Rome. Then Alfred, king of England, bade blow the horns of war, and fling the golden dragon out, with crackle and acclaim and shout, scrolled in a flame, and far. And under the golden king went Wessex all along, past the sharp point of the cloven ways, out from the black wood into the blaze of sun and steel and song. And when they came to the open land, they wheeled, deployed, and stood. Midmost were Marcus and the king, and Eldred on the right-hand wing, and leftwards Colin, Darkling, in the last shade of the wood. But the earls of the great army lay like a long half-moon, 10 poles before the palisades, with wide-winged helms and runic blades, red giants of an age of raids, in the thornland of Ethan Yune. Midmost the saddles rose and swayed, and a stir of horses' manes, where Guthrum and a few rode high, on horses' seed and victory, but Ogier went on foot to die, in the old way of the Danes. Far to the king's left Elf the bard, led on the eastern wing, with songs and spells that changed the blood, and on the king's right Harold stood, the kinsman of the king. Young Harold coursed with colours gay, smoking with oil and musk, and the pleasant violence of the young pushed through his people, giving tongue, forwards where, grey as cobwebs hung, the banners of the Usk. But as he came before his line, a little space along, his beardless face broke into mirth, and he cried, what broken bits of earth are here, for what their cloths are worth, I would sell them for a song. For Colin was hung with raiment, tattered like autumn leaves, and his men were all as thin as saints, and all as poor as thieves. No boughs were slung nor no bows nor slings nor bolts they bore, but bills and pikes ill made, and none but Colin bore a sword, and rusty was its blade. And Colin's eyes with mystery and iron laughter stirred, and he spoke aloud but lightly, not labouring to be heard. Oh, truly we be broken hearts, for that cause it is said, we light our candles to that Lord that broke himself for bread. But though we hold but bitterly what land the Saxon leaves, though Ireland be but a land of saints, and Wales a land of thieves, I say you yet shall weary of the working of your word, that stricken spirits never strike, nor lean hands hold a sword. And if ever ye ride in Ireland, the jest may yet be said, there is a land of broken hearts, and a land of broken heads. Not less barbarian laughter choked Harold like a flood, and shall I fight with scarecrows that am of Guthrum's blood? Meeting may be of war men, where the best war man wins, but all this carrion a man shoots before the fight begins. And stopping in his onward strides, he snatched a bow in scorn from some mean slave and bent it on Colin, whose doom grew dark and shone stars evil over Carleon in the place where he was born. For Colin had not bow nor sling, on a lonely sword he leaned he, like Arthur on Excalibur in the battle by the sea. To his great gold earring Harold tugged back the feathered tail, and swift had sprung the arrow, but swifter sprang the gale. Whirling the one sword round his head, a great wheel in the sun, he spent it splendid through the sky, flying before the shaft could fly. It smote Earl Harold over the eye, and blood began to run. Colin stood bare and weaponless. Earl Harold, as in pain, strove for a smile, put hand to head, stumbled, and suddenly fell dead. And the small white daisies all waxed red with blood out of his brain, and all at that marvel of the sword, cast like a stone to slay, cried out, said Alfred, who would see signs must give all things. Verily, man shall not taste the victory till he throws his sword away. Then Alfred, Prince of England, and all the Christian earls unhooked their swords and held them up, each offered to Colin like a cup of chrysolite and pearls. And the king said, do thou take my sword, who have done this deed of fire, for this is the manner of Christian men, whether of steel or priestly pen, that they cast their hearts out of their ken, to get their heart's desire. And whether ye swear a hive of monks, or one fair wife to friend, this is the manner of Christian men, that their oath endures the end. For love our Lord, at the end of the world, sits a red horse like a throne, with a brazen helm and an iron bow, but one arrow alone. Love with the shield of the broken heart, ever his bow doth bend, with a single shaft for a single prize, and the ultimate bolt that parts and flies, comes with the thunder of split skies, and the sound of souls that rend. So shall you earn a king's sword, who cast your swords away. And the king took with a random eye a rude axe from a hide hard by, and turned him to the fray. For the swords of the earls of Daneland flamed around the fallen lord. The first blood woke the trumpet tune, as in monk's rhyme or wizard's rune beginneth the battle of Ethandune, with the throwing of the sword. Book 6. Ethandune, the slaying of the chiefs. As the sea flooding in the flat sands, flew on the sea-born horde, the two hosts shocked with dust and din, left of the Latian paladin, clanged all Prince Harold's howling kin on Colin and the sword. Crashed in the midst of on Marcus, Ogier with Guthrum by, and eastward of such central stir, far to the right and faintlier, the house of Elf, the harp player, struck Eldred's with a cry. The center swat for wariness, stemming the screaming horde, and warily went Colin's hands that swung King Alfred's sword. But like a cloud of morning, to eastward easily, tall Aldred broke the sea of spears, as a tall ship breaks the sea. His face like a sanguine sunset, his shoulder a Wessex down, his hand like a windy hammer stroke. Men could not count the crests he broke, so fast the crests went down. As the tall white devil of the plague moves out of Asian skies, with his foot on a waste of cities, and his head in a cloud of flies, or purple and peacock skies grow dark, with a moving locust tower, or tawny sand winds tall and dry, like hell's red banners beat and fly, when death comes out of Araby, was Eldred in his hour. But while he moved like a massacre, he murmured as in sleep, and his words were all of low hedges, and little fields and sheep. Even as he strode like a pestilence, that strides from Rhine to Rome, he thought how tall his beans might be, if ever he went home. Spoke some stiff piece of childish prayer, dull as the distant chimes, that thank our God for good eating, and corn in quiet times. Till on the helm of a high chief fell shatteringly his brand, and the helm broke and the bone broke, and the sword broke in his hand. Then from the yelling Northmen, driven splintering on him ran, Full 7 spears in the 7th was never made by man. 7 spears in the 7th was wrought as the fiery blades, and given to Elf the minstrel by the monstrous water maids. By them that dwell where luridly lost waters of the Rhine move among roots of nations, being sunken for a sign. Under all graves they murmur and rebel, down to the buried kingdoms creep, and like a lost rain roar and weep o'er the red heavens of hell. Thrice drowned was Elf the minstrel, and washed his dead on sand, and the 3rd time men found him, the spear was in his hand. 7 spears went about Eldred, like stays about a mast, but there was sorrow by the sea, for the driving of the last. 6 spears thrust upon Eldred were splintered while he laughed. 1 spear thrust into Eldred, 3 feet of blade and shaft. And from the great heart grievously came forth the shaft and blade, and he stood with the face of a dead man, stood a little, and swayed. Then fell, as falls a battle tower, on smashed and struggled spears, cast down from some unconquered town, that rushing earthward carries down loads of live men of all renown, archers and engineers. And a great clamour of Christian men went up in agony, crying, "Fallen is the tower of Wessex that stood beside the sea." Centre and right the Wessex guard grew pale for doubt and fear, and the flank failed at the advance, for the death light on the wizard lands, the star of the evil spear. "Stand like an oak," cried Marcus, "stand like a Roman wall. Eldred the good is fallen, are you too good to fall? When we were wan and bloodless, he gave you ale and new, and now the pirates deal with him as dung. God, are you bloodless now? Grip wolf and Gorlias, grip the ash, slaves, and I make you free. Stamp, Hildred hardened English land. Stand Girth, stand Gorlias, Gawain stand. Hold Halfgar with the other hand. Halmer, hold up on knee. The lamps are dying in your homes, the fruits upon your bough. Even now your old thatch smolders, Girth. Now is the judgment of the earth. Now is the death grip. Now. For thunder of the captain, not less the Wessex line, leaned back and reeled his face to rear, as Elf charged with the Rhine maids' spear, and roaring like the Rhine. For the men were borne by the waving walls of woods and clouds that pass, by dizzy plains and drifting sea, and they mixed God with Glamouree, God with the gods of the burning tree, and the wizard's tower and glass. But Mark was come of the glittering towns, where hot white details show, where men can number and expound, and his faith grew in a hard ground, of doubt and reason and falsehood found, where no faith else could grow. Belief that grew of all beliefs, one moment back was blown, and belief that stood on unbelief, stood up iron and alone. The Wessex crescent backwards, crushed as with bloody spear, went Elf roaring and routing, and Mark against Elf yet shouting, shocked, in his mid-career. Right on the Roman shield and sword did spear of the Rhine maids run, but the shield shifted never, the sword rang down to sever, the great Rhine sang forever, and the songs of Elf were done. And a great thunder of Christian men went up against the sky, saying, God hath broken the evil spear, the good man's blood was dry. Spears at the charge, yelled Mark the Main, death on the gods of death, over the thrones of doom and blood, go with God that is a craftsman good, and golden iron, earth and wood, loveth and laboureth. The fruits leap up in all your farms, the lamps in each abode, God of all good things done on earth, all wheels are webs of any worth, the God that makes the roof girth, the God that makes the road. The God that heweth kings in oak, writeth songs in vellum, God of gold and flaming glass, confederate potentias, acrucum, scutum, gorlias, gladium et bellum. Steel and lightning broke about him, battle bays and palm, all the sea kings swayed among, woods of the Wessex arms upflung, the trumpet of the Roman tongue, the thunder of the psalm. And midmost of that rolling field ran Ogier ragingly, lashing at Mark, who turned his blow, and brake the helm about his brow, and broke him to his knee. Then Ogier heaved over his head his huge round shield of proof, but Mark set one foot on the shield, one on some sundered rock upheeled, and towered above the tossing field, a statue on a roof. Dealing far blows about the fight, like thunderbolts a roam, like birds about the battlefield, while Ogier writhed under his shield, like a tortoise in his dome. But hate in the buried Ogier was strong as pain in hell. With bare brute hand from the inside, he burst the shield of brass and hide, and a death stroke to the Roman side, sent suddenly and well. Then the great statue on the shield looked his last look around, with level imperial eye, and Mark, the man from Italy, fell in the sea of agony, and died without a sound. And Ogier, leaping up alive, hurled his huge shield away, flying as when a juggler flings a whizzing plate in play, and held two arms up rigidly, and roared to all the Danes, fallen is Rome, yea, fallen, the city of the plains. Shall no man born remember that breaketh wood or wield, how long she stood on the roof of the world, as he stood on my shield? The new wild world forgetteth her, as foam fades on the sea, how long she stood with her foot on man, as he with his foot on me. Nor more shall The brown men of the south move like the ants and lions, too quiet men with olives, or maddened men with vines. No more shall the white towns of the south, where Tiber and Nulus run, sitting around a secret sea, worship a secret sun. The blind gods roar for Rome fallen, and Forum and Garland gone. For the ice of the north is broken, and the sea of the north comes on. The blind gods roar and rave and dream of all cities under the sea, for the heart of the north is broken, and the blood of the north is free. Down from the dome of the world we come, rivers on rivers down. Under us swirl the sects and hordes, and the high dooms we drown. Down from the dome of the world and down, struck flying as a skiff, on a river in space is spun and swirled, until we come to the end of the world that breaks short like a cliff. And when we come to the end of the world, for me I count it fit to take the leap like a good river, shot shrieking over it. But what so hap at the end of the world, where nothing is struck in sounds, it is not by Thor, these monkish men, these humbled Wessex hounds. Not this pale line of Christian hinds, this one white string of men, shall keep us back from the end of the world and the things that happened then. It is not Alfred's dwarfish sword, nor Egbert's pigmy crown, shall stay us now that descend in thunder, rending the realms and the realms thereunder, down through the world and down. There was that in the wild men back of him, there was that in his own wild song, a dizzy throbbing of drunkard smoke, that dazed to death all Wessex folk, and swept their spears all along. Vainly the sword of Colin and the axe of Alfred plied, the Danes poured in like a brainless plague, and knew not when they died. Prince Colin slew a score of them, and was stricken to his knee. King Alfred slew 67, and was borne back on a tree. Back to the black gate of the woods, back up the single way, back by the place of the parting ways, Christ's knights were ruled away. And when they came to the parting ways, Doom's heaviest hammer fell, for the king was beaten, blind at bay, down the right lane with his array, but Colin swept the other way, where he smote great strokes and fell. The thorn woods over Ethandune stand sharp and thick as spears, by night in firs and forest harms, far sundered were the friends in arms, the loud lost blows, the last alarms, came not to Alfred's ear. The thorn woods over Ethandune stand stiff as spikes in mail, as to the hot king came at morn, dead Roland on a doubtful horn, seemed unto Alfred lightly born, the last cry of the gale. Book 8. Ethandune, the last charge. Away in the waste of Whitehorse Down, an idle child alone, played some small game through hours that passed, and patiently would pluck the grass, patiently push the stone. On the lean green edge forever, with a blank chalk touched the turf, the child played on alone divine, as a child plays on the last line that sunders sand and surf. For he dwelleth in high divisions, too simple to understand, seeing on what morn of mystery the uncreated rent the sea with roarings from the land. Through the long infant hours like days, he built one tower in vain, piled up small stones to make a town, and evermore the stones fell down, and he piled them up again. And crimson kings on battle towers, and saints on Gothic spires, and hermits on their peaks of snow, and heroes on their pyres, and patriots riding royally, that rush the rocking town, stretch hands in hunger and aspire, seeking to mount where high and higher, the child whom time can never tire, sings over Whitehorse Down. And this was the might of Alfred, at the ending of the way, that of such smiters wise or wild, he was least distant from the child, piling the stones all day. For Eldred fought like a frank hunter, that killeth and goeth home, and Mark had fought because all arms rang like the name of Rome, and Colin fought with a double mind, moody and madly gay, but Alfred fought as gravely, as a good child at play. He saw wheels break and work run back, and all things as they were, and his heart was orbed like victory, and simple like despair. Therefore is Mark forgotten, that was wise with his tongue and brave, and the cairn over Colin crumbled, and the cross on Eldred's grave. Their great souls went on a wind away, and they have not tale or tomb. And Alfred born in Wantage rules England till the doom. Because in the forest of all fears, like a strange fresh gust from sea, struck him that ancient innocence that is more than mastery. And as a child whose bricks fall down, repiles them o'er and o'er, came ruin and the rain that burns, returning as the wheel returns. And crouching in the furs and ferns, he began his life once more. He took his ivory horn unslung, and smiled, but not in scorn. Endeth the battle of Ethandune with the blowing of a horn. On a dark horse as a double way, he saw great Guthrum ride, heard roar of brass and ring of steel, the laughter and the trumpet peal, the pagan and his pride. And Ogier's red and hated head moved in some talk or task, but the men seemed scattered in the briar, and some of them had lit a fire, and one had broached a cask. And wagons, one or two stood up, like tall ships in sight, as if an outpost were encamped at the cloven ways for night. A joyous of the sudden stay of Alfred's rooted few, sat one upon a stone to sigh, and some slipped up the road to fly, till Alfred in the fern hard by set horn to mouth, and blew. And they all abode like statues, one sitting on the stone, one halfway through the thorn hedge tall, one with a leg across a wall, and one looked backwards, very small, far up the road, alone. Grey twilight and a yellow star hung over thorn and hill. 2 spears and a cloven war shield lay loose on the road as cast away. The horn died faint in the forest grey, and the fleeing men stood still. Brothers at arms, said Alfred, on this side lies the foe. Our slavery and starvation flowers, that you should pluck them so. For whether is it better to be prodded with Danish poles, having hewn a chamber in a ditch, and hounded like a howling witch, or smoked to death in holes? Or that before the red cock crow, all we 1,000 strong, go down the dark road to God's house, singing a Wessex song? To sweat a slave to a race of slaves, to drink up infamy? No, brothers, by your leave, I think, death is a better ale to drink, and by all the stars of Christ that sink, the Danes shall drink with me. To grow old cowed in a conquered land, with the sun itself discrowned, to see trees crouch and cattle slink, death is a better ale to drink, and by high death on the fell brink, that flagon shall go round. Though dead are all the paladins whom glory had in ken, though all your thunder-sworded thanes with proud hearts died among the Danes, while a man remains, great war remains. Now is a war of men. The men that tear the furrows, the men that fell the trees, when all their lords be lost and dead, the bondsmen of the earth shall tread, tyrants of the seas. The wheel of the roaring stillness of all labours under the sun, speed the wild work as well at least, as the whole world's work is done. Let the Hildred hack the shield wall, clean as he hacks the hedge. Let Gurth the fowler stand as cool as he stands on the chasm's edge. Let Gorlias ride the sea kings as Gorlias rides the sea. Then let all hell in Denmark drive, yelling to all its friends, its fiends alive, and not a rag care we. When Alfred's word was ended, stood firm that feeble line, each in his place with club or spear, and fury deeper than deep fear, and smiles as sour as brine. And the king held up the horn and said, See ye my father's horn, that Egbert blew in his empery, once when he rode out commonly, twice when he rode for venery, and thrice on the battle morn. But heavier fates have fallen, the horn of the Wessex kings, and I blew once the riding sign, to call you to the fighting line, and glory in all good things. And now 2 blasts the hunting sign, because we turn to bay, but I will not blow the 3 blasts, till we beat, lost, or they. And now I blow the hunting sign, charge some by rule or rod, but when I blow the battle sign, charge all, and go to God. Wild stare the Danes at the double ways, where they loitered all at large, as that dark line for the last time doubled the knee to charge, and caught their weapons clumsily, and marvelled how and why, in such degree by rule and rod, the people of the peace of God went roaring down to die. And when the last arrow was fitted and was flown, when the broken shield hung on the breast, and the hopeless lance was laid in rest, and the hopeless horn blown, the king looked up, and what he saw was a great light like death, for Our Lady stood on the standard's rent, as lonely and as innocent as when between white walls she went, and the lilies of Nazareth. One instant in a still light he saw Our Lady then. Her dress was soft as western sky, and she was a queen most womanly, but she was a queen of men. Over the iron forest he saw Our Lady stand. Her eyes were sad without an art, and 7 swords were in her heart, but one was in her hand. Then the last charge went blindly, and all too lost for fear. The Danes closed round a roaring ring, and 20 clubs rose o'er the king. 4 Danes hewed at him, howling, and Ogier of the stone and sling drove at him with a spear. But the Danes were wild with laughter, and the great spear swung wide. The point stuck to a straggling tree, and either host cried suddenly, as Alfred leapt aside. Short time had shaggy Ogier to pull his lance in line. He knew King Alfred's axe on high. He heard it rushing through the sky. He cowered beneath it with a cry. It split him to the spine, and Alfred sprang over him dead, and blew the battle sign. Then bursting all and blasting, came Christendom like death, kicked of such catapults of will, the staves shivering, the barrels spill, the wagons waver and crash and kill, the wagoners beneath. Barriers go backwards, banners rend, great shields groan like a gong, horses like horns of nightmare, neigh horribly and long. Horses ramp high and rock and boil, and break their golden reins, and slide on carnage clamorously, down where the bitter blood doth lie, where Ogier went on foot to die, in the old way of the Danes. The high tide, King Alfred cried, the high tide and the turn. As the tide turns on the tall grey seas, see how they waver in the trees, how stray their spears, how knock their knees, how wild their watchfires burn. The Mother of God goes over them, walking on wind and flame, and the storm cloud drifts from city and dale, and the white horse stamps in the white horse vale, and we all shall yet drink Christian ale in the village of our name. The Mother of God goes over them, on the dreadful cherubs borne, and the psalm is roaring above the rune, and the cross goes over the sun and moon, endeth the battle of Ethandune, with the blowing of a horn. For back indeed disorderly the Danes went clamouring, too worn to take anew the tale, or dazed with insolence and ale, or stunned of heaven, or stricken pale, before the face of the king. For dire was Alfred in his hour, the pale scribe witnesseth, more mighty in defeat was he than all men else in victory, and behind his men came murderously, dry-throated, drinking death. And Edgar of the golden ship he slew with his own hand, took Ludwig from his lady's bower, and smote down Harmer in his hour, and vain and lonely stood the tower in Guelderland. And tore out of his tiny boat, whose eyes beheld the Nile, Wolf with his war cry on his lips, and Harco born in the eclipse, who blocked the sign with battleships round Paris on the isle. And Hacken of the harvest song, and Dirk from the Elbe he slew, and Knut that melted Durham bell, and Falk and fiery Oscar fell, and Goderic and Sigael, and Uriel of the Yew. And highest sang the slaughter, and fastest fell the slain, where from the wood road's blackening throat, and a crowning and crashing wonder smote the rear guard of the Dane. For the dregs of Colin's company, lost down the other road, had gathered and groaned, and heard the din, and with wild yells came pouring in, naked as old British kin, and bright with blood for woad. And bare and bloody aloft, they bore before their band the body of the mighty lord, Colin of Caerleon, and its horde, that bore King Alfred's battle sword, broken in his left hand. And a strange music went with him, loud and yet strangely far, the wild pipes of the western land, too keen from the ear to understand, sang high and deathly on each hand, when the dead man went to war. Blocked between ghost and buccaneer, brave men have dropped and died, and the wild sea lords well might quail, as the ghastly war pipes of the gale called to the horns of White Horse Vale, and all the horns replied. And Hildred the poor hedger cut down 4 captains dead, and Halmer laid 3 others low, and the great earls wavered to and fro, for the living and the dead. And Gorlias grasped the great flag, the raven of Odin torn, and the eyes of Guthrum altered for the first time since morn, as a turn of the wheel of tempest tilts up the whole sky tall, and cliffs of wan cloud luminous lean out like great walls over us, and as if the heavens might fall. As such a tall and tilted sky sends certain snow or light, so did the eyes of Guthrum change, and the turn was more certain and more strange than 1,000 men in flight. For not till the floor of the skies is split, and hellfire shines through the sea, or the stars look up through the rent earth's knees, cometh such rending of certainties, as when one wise man truly sees what is more wise than he. He set his horse in the battle's breach, even Guthrum of the Dane, and as ever had fallen fell his brand, a falling tower o'er many a land, but Gurth the Fowler laid one hand upon this bridal rein. King Guthrum was a great lord, and higher than his gods. He put the popes to laughter, he chid the saints with rods. He took this hollow world of ours for a cup to hold his wine. In the parting of the woodways there came to him a sign. In Wessex in the forest, in the breaking of the spears, we set a sign on Guthrum to blaze 1,000 years. Where the high saddles jostle and the horse tails toss, there rose to the birds flying a roar of dead and dying. In deafness and strong crying, we signed him with the cross. Far out to the winding river, the blood ran down for days, when we put the cross on Guthrum in the parting of the ways. Book 8. The Scouring of the Horse. In the years of the peace of Wessex, when the good king sat at home, years following in that bloody boon, when she that stands above the moon stood above death at Ethandune, and saw his kingdom come, when the pagan people of the sea fled to their palisades, nailed there with javelins to cling, and wonder smote the pirate king, and brought him to his christening and the end of all his raids. For not till the night's blue slate is wiped of its last star utterly, and fierce new signs writ there to read, shall eyes with such amazement heed, as when a great man knows indeed a greater thing than he. And there came to his chrism loosing lords of all lands afar, and a line was drawn northwesterly, that set King Egbert's empire free, giving all lands by the northern sea to the sons of the northern star. In the days of the rest of Alfred, when all these things were done, and Wessex lay in a patch of peace like a dog in a patch of sun, the king sat in his orchard, among apples green and red, with a little book in his bosom and the sunshine on his head. And he gathered the songs of simple men that swing with helm and hod, and the alms he gave as a Christian, like a river alive with fishes ran, and he made gifts to a beggar man as to a wandering god. And he gat good laws of the ancient kings, like treasure out of the tombs, and many a thief in thorny nook, or noble in sea-stained turret shook for the opening of his iron book and the gathering of the dooms. Then men would come from the ends of the earth, whom the king sat welcoming, and men would go to the ends of the earth because of the word of the king. For folk came into Alfred's face, whose javelins had been hurled on monsters that make boil the sea, krakens and coils of mystery, or thrust in ancient snows that be the white hair of the world. And some had knocked at the northern gates of the ultimate icy floor, where the fish freeze and the foam turns black, and the wide world narrows to a track, and the other sea at the world's back cries through a closed door. And men went forth from Alfred's face, even great gift-bearing lords, not to Rome only, but more bold, out to the high, hot courts of old, of negroes clad in cloth of gold, silence and crooked swords. Scrawled screens and secret gardens, and insect-laden skies, where fiery plains stretch on and on to the purple country of Prester John and the walls of paradise. And he knew the might of the Terre Majeure, where kings began to reign, or in a night rout without name of gloomy Goths and Gauls there came, white above candles all aflame, like a vision, Charlemagne. And men, seeing such embassies, spake with the king and said, the steel that sang so sweet a tune on Ashdown and on Ethan Dune, why hangs it scabbarded so soon, all heavily, like lead? Why dwell the Danes in North England, and up to the river ride? 3 more such marches like thy own would end them, and the Pict should own our sway, and our feet climb the throne in the mountains of Strathclyde. Clyde. And Alfred in the orchard, among apples green and red, with a little book in his bosom, looked at green leaves and said, when all philosophy shall fail, this word alone shall fit, that a sage feels too small for life, and a fool too large for it. Asia and all imperial plains are too little for a fool, but for one man whose eyes can see, the little island of Athenry is too large a land to rule. Happily it had been better, when I built my fortress there, out in the reedy waters wide, I had stood on my mud wall and cried, take England all, from tide to tide, be Athenry my share. Those madmen of the throne scramble, oppressors and oppressed, had lined the banks of Athenry, and waved and wailed unceasingly, where the river turned to the broad sea by an island of the blessed. An island like a little book, full of 100 tales, like the gilt page the good monk's pen, that is all smaller than a wren, yet hath high towns, meteors and men, and suns and spouting whales. A land having a light on it, and the river dark and fast, an isle with utter clearness lit, because a saint had stood in it, where flowers are flowers indeed and fit, and trees are trees at last. So were the island of a saint, but I am a common king, and I will make my fences tough, from Wantage Town to Plymouth Bluff, because I am not wise enough to rule so small a thing. And it fell in the days of Alfred, and the days of his repose, that his old customs in his sight were a straight road and a steady light. He bade them keep the white horse white as the first plume of the snows. And right to the red torchlight, from the trouble of morning grey, they stripped the white horse of the grass, as they strip it to this day. And under the red torchlight he went dreaming as though dull, of his old companions slain like kings, and the rich irrevocable things, of a heart that hath not openings, but is shut fast, being full. And the torchlight touched the pale hair with silver-clouded gold, and the frame of his face was made of cords, and a young lord turned among the lords, and said, the king is old. And even as he said it, a post ran in amain, crying, arm, Lord King, the hamlet's arm, in the horror and the shade of harm, they have burnt brand of Agner's farm, the Danes are coming again. Danes drive the white east Angles, in 6 fights on the plains. Danes waste the world about the Thames, Danes to the eastward, Danes. And as he stumbled on one knee, the Thanes broke out in crying, I'll the watchmen watch, and ill the sheriffs keep the shire. But the young earl said, ill the saints of England guard, the land wherein we pledged them gold. The dikes decay, the king grows old, and surely this is hard. That we be never quit of them, that when his head is hoar, he cannot say to them he smote, and spared with the hand hard at the throat, go and return no more. Then Alfred smiled, and the smile of him was like the sun for power, but he only pointed, bade them heed, those peasants of the Berkshire breed, who pluck the old horse of the weed, as they pluck it to this hour. Will ye part with the weeds forever, or show daisies to the door, or will you bid the bold grass go, and return no more? So ceaseless and so secret, thrive terror and theft set free, treason and shame shall come to pass, while one weed flowers in a morass, and like the stillness of stiff grass, the stillness of tyranny. Over our white souls also, wild heresies and high, wave prouder than the plumes of grass, and sadder than their sigh. And I go riding against the raid, and ye know not where I am, but ye shall know in a day or year, when one green star of grass grows here, chaos has charged you, charger and spear, battle axe and battering ram. And though skies alter and empires melt, this word shall still be true. If we would have the horse of old, scour ye the horse in you. One time I followed the dancing star that seemed to sing and nod, and ring upon earth all evil's knell. And know I wot, if ye scour not well, red rust shall grow on God's great bell, and grass in the streets of God. Ceased all of Alfred, and above his head the grand green domes, the downs, showed the first legions of the press, marching in haste and bitterness, for Christ's sake and the crowns. Beyond the cavern of Colin, past elders by the sea, rose men that owned King Alfred's rod, from the windy wastes of Exe untrod, where the thorn of the grave of God burns over Glastonbury. Far northward and far westward the distant tribes drew nigh, plains beyond plains, fell beyond fell, that a man at sunset sees so well, and the tiny coloured towns that dwell in the corners of the sky. But dark and thick as thronged the host, with drum and torch and blade, the still-eyed king sat pondering, as one that watches a live thing, the scoured chalk, and he said, Thou I give this land to Our Lady, that helped me in Athenly. Thou, lordlier trees and lustier sod, and happier hills hath no flesh trod, than the garden of the Mother of God, between Thames side and the sea. I know that wheat shall grow in it, faster than men can burn, and though they scatter now and go, in some far century sad and slow, I had a vision, and I know, the heathen shall return. They shall not come with warships, they shall not waste with brands, but books be all their eating, and ink be on their hands, not with the humor of the hunters, or savage skill in war, but ordering all things with dead words, strings shall they make of beasts and birds, and wheels of wind and star. They shall come mild as monkish clerks, with many a scroll and pen, and backward shall ye turn and gaze, desiring one of Alfred's days, when pagans still were men. The dear sun dwarfed of dreadful suns, like fiercer flowers on stalk, earth lost, and little like a pea, in high heaven's towering forestry, these be the small weeds ye shall see, crawl, covering the chalk. But though they bridge St. Mary's sea, or steal St. Michael's wing, though they rear marvels over us, greater than great Virgilius, wrought for the Roman king. By this sign ye shall know them, the breaking of the sword, and man no more a free knight, that loves or hates his lord. Yea, this shall be the sign of them, the sign of the dying fire, and man made like a half-wit, that knows not of his sire. What thou they come with scroll and pen, and grave as a shaven clerk, by this sign you shall know them, that they ruin and make dark. By all men bond to nothing, being slaves without a lord, by one blind idiot world obeyed, too blind to be abhorred. By terror and the cruel tales of curse and bone and kin, by weird and weakness winning, a curse from the beginning, by detail of the sinning, and denial of the sin. By thought a crawling ruin, by life a leaping mire, by a broken heart in the breast of the world, and the end of the world's desire, by God and man dishonored, by death and life made vain. Know ye the old barbarian, the barbarian come again. When his great talk of trend and tide, and wisdom and destiny, hail that undying heathen, that is sadder than the sea. And what wise men shall smite him, or the cross stand up again, or charity or chivalry, my vision say it not, and I see no more, but now ride doubtfully to the battle of the plain. And the grass edge of the great down was cut clean as a lawn, while the levy strong from near and far, from the warm woods of the western star, and the king went out to his last war, on a tall grey horse at dawn, and news of his far-flung fighting came slowly and brokenly from the land of the East Saxons, from the sunrise and the sea. From the plains of the white sunrise, and sad St. Edmund's crown, where the pools of Essex pale and gleam out beyond London town. In mighty and doubtful fragments, like faint or fabled wars, climb the old hills of his renown, where the bald brow of Whitehorse Down is close to the cold stars. But away in the eastern places, the wind of death walked high, and a raid was driven athwart the raid. The sky reddened and the smoke swayed, and the tall grey horse went by. The gates of the great river were breached as with a barge, the walls sank crowded, say the scribes, and high towers populous with tribes seemed leaning from the charge. Smoke like rebellious heavens rolled, curled over coloured flames, mirrored in monstrous purple dreams in the mighty pools of Thames. Loud was the war in London wall, and loud in London gates, and loud the sea kings in the cloud broke through their dreaming gods, and loud cried on their dreadful fates. And all the while on Whitehorse Hill the horse lay long and wan. The turf crawled and the fungus crept, and the little sorrow, while all men slept, unwrought the work of man. With velvet finger, velvet foot, the fierce soft mosses then crept on the large white common wheel. All folk had striven to strip and peel, and the grass, like a great green witch's wheel, unwound the toils of men. And clover and silent thistle throve, and buds burst silently, with little care for the Thames valley, or what things there might be. That away on the widening river, and the eastern plains for crown, stood up in the pale purple sky, one turret of smoke like ivory, and the smoke changed, and the wind went by, and the king took London town.